The violent clashes in Kyrgyzstan were well planned and orchestrated. That's the view from the UN Commission for Human Rights, which says the conflict was sparked by coordinated attacks of armed men in the city of Osh. Rupert Colville, who's a spokesman for the Commission, believes there's enough evidence to support the claims too.
On the one hand, the provisional government is saying that very strongly and clearly, but we also have a very good, tried and trusted network of people we deal with in the Osh area in Jalalabad. And our staff in Bishkek have been talking to them a lot over the last few days. And basically there's pretty much a consensus that this wasn't, a spontaneous interethnic clash. This was something deliberately provoked. It seems there were 5 simultaneous attacks on the first night. It isn't simply an ethnic issue. There may well be strong political undertones, possibly even criminal undertones. Osh is a center of some of the big drug dealing gangs dealing with drugs coming out of Afghanistan, so there could be an element of criminality involved as well. We've been saying it's obviously essential, first and foremost, to stop the violence. And I think the good news is that things do seem to have calmed down a little bit in the last couple of days, but still extremely tense. And, things could easily spark off again. So stopping the violence is first priority. Second priority, getting aid to the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who've been caught out by this conflict and are now in pretty desperate circumstances.
Well, for the residents of southern Kyrgyz towns, the brutality of the riots has come as an absolute shock. RT's Oksana Boyko looks at the human side of an ethnic tragedy and hears why many thought they were living in a tolerant country.
They brush off questions about the length of their friendship as if they were about their age. Born and raised in South Kyrgyzstan, Barno and Cholpan have known each other since kindergarten. Years have passed, their haircuts and husbands have changed, but they've always been there for each other.
We're like sisters. No, we're even closer. In Islam, there is a notion of a friend so close she can take her sins upon herself to stand before Allah. That's how close we are.
An Uzbek and a Kyrgyz, the two remember their home city of Osh as an example of interethnic tolerance.
Do you remember our class?
There is this nostalgia and homesickness that make them all the more terrified of going home. Friends for most of their lives, Barno and Cholpan have also started a small business together, trading in medicines. But ironically, there is no place in Kyrgyzstan right now that needs their supplies more desperately than their home city of Osh, where people that used to go to the same school together are now killing each other on the streets. With houses still smoldering and automatic gunshots still ringing, the city of Osh has become a living inferno. While the brutality of riots came as an absolute shock, analysts had long warned the Fergana Valley, where Osh is located, was a potential tinderbox. The nonsensical borders drawn by Joseph Stalin in the 1920s left patches of Uzbek territory cutting through Kyrgyz land.
When they decided to draw the border between Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, it turned out that the Kyrgyz did not have their cities, as they are traditionally nomads. Therefore, it was decided to hand over one of the cities inhabited by the Uzbeks to Kyrgyzstan to help its development. As a result, the large Uzbek community, living both in Osh and Jalalabad, appeared to be part of another state. That's where discrepancies and political contradictions between the Uzbek and Kyrgyz nations come from.
The fertile soil of the Fergana Valley has bred conflict in the past. 20 years ago, the region saw its first ethnic riots over land, which almost cost Cholpan her life.
And we saw crowds ahead of us. One of the crowds was made up of Uzbeks, the other of Kyrgyz. They attacked our bus. There was an Uzbek woman there, about my age now with a baby. I was a schoolgirl at the time. She had me out of her seat and covered me up with her long dress. All the others on the bus were killed. I saw it all happen. I was covered in blood.
She says that horrifying experience didn't make her scared of her hometown, something she bitterly regrets now. The two friends send their children to Osh for holidays and still can't figure out how to get them back. Oksana Boyko, RT, Kyrgyzstan.
And indeed, social anthropologist Madeleine Reeves, who once lived in Osh, says people there prefer to be called simply local residents rather than be identified by their nationalities.
I think it's fair to say that the Kyrgyz and the Uzbek communities, as a rule, get on very, very peacefully. I mean, there's a centuries-long, millennia-long history of coexistence here between different cultural groups, different modes of life. In all of the accounts of what's been happening in terms of a discussion about deep-seated inter-ethnic hatreds, I think one of the things that really gets missed is the fact that most people who live in the city of Osh are bilingual, if not trilingual, between Kyrgyz, Uzbek and sometimes Russian as well. There's a great deal of intermarriage that goes on in the city. A lot of people identify much more as Osh residents rather than as Kyrgyz or Uzbeks primarily. So I think this has to be situated in the context of a situation of historical interdependence and coexistence, which is nonetheless marked by considerable tensions. That's also true, and it's also the case that the Kyrgyz and the Uzbeks typically occupy different structural economic positions within the city economy, and I think on both sides there are quite legitimate feelings of grievances which have played into the current conflict.